Hello, my name is Tim LeMasters, and I'm a director here at McGuire Sponsel. I have today with me my colleague, David Seibel. David is a shareholder in our R&D Tax Credits practice. We have some exciting news today. So this is something that's kind of been long-winded, I feel like, a long time coming. It's been back and forth, wondering if it's going to happen, if it's not going to happen. But Michigan has passed its final. It's been signed. They are now enacting the R&D tax credit on the state level, and I feel like it was just something that we needed to get out there for a lot of our Michigan relationships, a lot of our Michigan clients, to make sure that there's some awareness to this. I imagine everybody in Michigan is pretty aware, especially if you've been claiming the R&D tax credit here in the past. But we're excited about it. Slide, maybe you can just give a quick overview of it, maybe some background, some history. I think it would be a good starting point, but I'll let you take over from here.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, like you pointed out, it's really was a long and winding road. The first series of bills that was passed enacting this credit was first in October of 23, and so you look through the back and forth. Like you said, the Senate ultimately passed in 24 in March, but then they had a few things to send back to the House, and then the House ended up finally voting on it in November. So then the bills were ready for signature, and we still played the waiting game. So on January 13th is when the governor signed the bill to actually formally enact this research credit, as well as an innovation fund to help fuel startups as well. But for purposes of the discussion today, we'll talk about a little bit about the details about the research credit. The same things that qualify for the federal credit qualify for the Michigan credit. The only stipulation, similar to other state incentives, is that the research has to be done in Michigan. So the wages, the supplies, the contract research, they all have to be conducted in Michigan to qualify for this credit. There is a different calculation methods depending on if you're a small or large business, and the small or large business designation is dependent on employees. So small businesses are less than 250 employees, large businesses are 250 employees or more. So small businesses, what the calculation there is that you get 3% of QREs up to the base amount, and then 15% of that of a credit exceeding the base amount, capped at $250,000. And the base amount in this instance is the average annual amount of QREs during the preceding 3 years. So it's like the alternative simplified credit, except there's a little bit of a higher floor there, because for the federal you get 50% of the previous 3 years, so it's a little bit of a little bit less of a hurdle to pass. For Michigan, it's going to be just the average of the prior 3 years.
I want to make sure we kind of wrap our minds around this completely. So if you look at the federal credit, right? Mm-hmm. If for the identified qualified research expenditures, or QREs, mm-hmm. you're usually going to get about a 6 to 7% return on those identified QREs. So if we look at certain other states that have got the state credit, obviously there's a lot of different percentages. And where would you say that Michigan's falls from an identified QRE standpoint? Where do they fall from a percentage standpoint?
So like I said, you get the 3% up to the base amount, and then 15% above that. So it really depends on how much you exceed that base. So
that's what. Okay.
If you get $1 over the base amount, then it's going to be that 3%. If you have a really good big year expenditure wise, it could climb as high as probably 7, 8, 9%. But again, we are being capped at $250,000 for small businesses. Large businesses, like I said, that's 250 employees or more. You get the same 3% up to the base amount, and then 10% of QREs exceeding the base amount, whereas small businesses got 15%. And large businesses, again, is capped at $2 million. So small businesses is $250,000, large businesses it's $2 million.
Okay, so in looking at this, so like let's take Pennsylvania for example. Pennsylvania kind of has like a pool of money that they have set aside for the R&D tax credit. And typically, if you go out and claim, let's say we find $100,000 in Pennsylvania credits, R&D credits for a client, even though that's what we find and that's what they submit for. Mm-hmm. Usually we're seeing them, depending on if they're small or large business, we're seeing about a 30 to 50% of what they submit is what they receive. Is that similar here?
It's too early to tell. I think that we'll see what the initial pool looks like. It probably will be higher percentages than Pennsylvania just because of those $2 million and $250,000 caps per entity. So you think about a lot of the large companies in Pennsylvania, they may be claiming a lot more than $2 million. So they might be claiming, 6, 7, 8, 9 million plus, or, maybe extremely large companies are claiming even more than that. Capping it at $2 million per large entity, I think helps make it so that there's a little bit more to go around. And the budget for this program is $100 million.
Okay.
$25 million of it is reserved for small businesses, so that is similar to Pennsylvania, where they do have a little bit of a smaller pool, but still a pool dedicated to small businesses to help them get that higher percentage of credit. Because to your point, smaller businesses in Pennsylvania typically get a little bit of a higher percentage of what they claim for versus large businesses. It's probably going to follow to be a similar pattern here,
Mhm.
where the larger businesses, particularly like a GM or a Ford or companies that are centrally located in Michigan are going to be limited to that $2 million. So, there might be a lot more companies claiming those amounts. Might ultimately result in smaller overall reward as opposed to the small businesses.
And then what about for like startup businesses that maybe don't have any, you know, tax liability? Is there any options? Have you seen anything where there's any options to maybe sell these credits?
So
Um,
you can't sell them, but they are fully refundable. So that's even more valuable than selling them. Pennsylvania does have a program where you can sell them because they're not refundable. Michigan is a situation where the entity still has to retain it. There's no option to reassign the credits. So even in a pass-through entity perspective, they won't be able to pass the credits on. But again, since it's a refundable credit, that's even probably a lot better than passing on the credit.
that's great. Yeah, that's good news. Any other insights on it or things that are need to know?
A couple other things that I failed to mention before we were talking about the calculations. So, taxpayers that are collaborating with a research university in Michigan can claim an additional 5% credit, but that can't exceed 200K. So that's another cap, but again, another good opportunity for those companies they're performing research with a university. Since this is an application-based credit, you have to make sure that you're adhering to the deadlines. So the first year for 2025, so this program is effective for tax years beginning on or after January 1st, 2025. The first year to submit for the 25 years, April 1st of 2026. And then following that, it's going to be March 15th each year after that. Any companies that are, look to extend every year and start doing their research credits later, performing a study later, probably makes sense to pull that work forward so that we're able to make sure that they're able to properly apply for the Michigan research credit and they don't miss
Because
out on that
there's no
opportunity.
extension for that. They don't have any extension for that. So it's file on time or lose the opportunity.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So if, it's something very much so that it's a good enough opportunity where taxpayers should strongly consider looking into it, applying for it, shifting that burden to the beginning of the year to be able to calculate what the credit is. Doesn't mean from a federal perspective they have to file. If they're accustomed to extending for one reason or another, still get the work done. You can still extend, but just make sure that you have the Michigan credit application sent in by the deadline.
Okay. That's great. Well, this is very exciting. So, and for everybody listening to this, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, please reach out to your direct contact here at McGuire Sponsel. Don't hesitate to reach out to Sly or myself. Happy to get some answers, but looking forward to exploring some opportunity with you all. And thank you for listening.